So the intent today is to take you from this unaware stage to the aware stage. As you can see, the unaware person is fearful. They don't know what to do, and so a lot of times they will react when when they shouldn't be reacting. So we're hopefully going to make you aware of all these things that are out there that can potentially steal your money, and we're going to make you aware, so you'll be more calm and can make decisions easily. So what we're going to do today is talk about the threats that are out there. We're going to start with one that's called the PUP, and PUP stands for Potentially Unwanted Program. So what is it what it actually is a potentially unwanted program? Well, as you can see by the slide, it's software that ended up on your computer by you typically, that you didn't intend to put on your computer. It's usually packaged with some other software that when you went to download something from the internet and you intended to install it on your computer, when you did so, you actually had additional software packaged with it. So they also come, they use a technique called dark patterns, which what they do is try to force your hand in choosing the software, or choosing an option that you didn't really intend to do. They try to steer you in the wrong way, and they do that through pre-populating a checkbox, or they will tell you something is advanced and you shouldn't do that. In the case of antivirus, a lot of times they have a free version and a paid version of their software, and so when you try to download the free version, they will constantly steer you towards the paid version. And so that's just something to be aware of. They just try to direct you to what they want you to do, not what you want to do. So how do you know if you actually have a potentially unwanted program? Well, you may have what's called browser hijacking. So if you usually go to MSNBC or Fox News or Google, any website, when you typically open up your web browser, it takes you to your home page. And if all of a sudden that has changed, that's an example of browser hijacking. So the software has actually redirected your web page to one that they want you to be on. It's also, if you try to do a search and you typically use Google, well, you may end up being redirected to Yahoo, for example. So that's one example, or a couple of examples. You also may get what are called either extensions or add-ons that get added to your web browser. Now, I use Google Chrome as my default web browser, so a lot of what I mentioned, I'm gonna refer to Chrome today. But Chrome has extensions, and some of them can be legitimate, valid ones. I use one called AdBlock Plus, which blocks advertisements on web pages. But there are other ones that can get added to your browser inadvertently. Again, it's typically you allowing it, but once you do, then it redirects your searches or targets ads towards you. You'll notice that you'll get more ads built. It actually will inject the ad into the web page that you're looking at, and it's all done through these extensions. It'll also add PC cleaners or optimizers, driver boosters, or other examples. So what they'll typically do is tell you, the software will say, oh, you need to have your drivers updated. And then the second you try to update them, it'll then tell you have to pay money to do that. And drivers are free. There's no cost for them. And so that's just an example of where they're going to try to get you to do something where you shouldn't. Also, the optimizers or the cleaners, they'll give you false reports about viruses on your computer. And if you buy their product and activate it, then they'll correct those viruses. But typically, those are actually false scans. So the software itself doesn't really run a scan, but it tells you that it does. So that's where I say it's misleading or inaccurate claims. They'll say that there's something wrong when in reality, they haven't even done anything. They're just trying to get you to buy their software. So I'm going to step through a few examples of unwanted software and how you end up with unwanted, or PUPs, as I say, on your computer. So this is CUTEPDF Writer. It's a legitimate program. It converts anything you print, it converts it to a PDF file. So if you have a picture and you want to make a PDF out of it, you can print it to this CUTEPDF Writer and it will generate a PDF file, which you then could send to somebody if you liked, or just a digital document. When I tried to install CUTEPDF on my computer, notice that it's putting on CUTEPDF, which if you look at the very top banner here, it shows me this is the setup for CUTEPDF Writer. But in this example, it's also trying to make this recommended offer that includes this Tahoma search app. And you'll notice that this dark pattern that they're using is this big green emphasis that they placed on this checkbox, that they want me to check that box to include this Tahoma search app. And once I do that, I also inadvertently agree to their privacy policy. Well, that privacy policy may include selling your information to other people. So just be aware that that's an example of a dark pattern. So in my case, what I did is I clicked on next, which typically when people go to install software, they just click next, 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 don't really pay attention to what they're doing. And so in this case, if I click next, it actually then grayed out the screen and emphasized even more so that they really wanted me to check this box here and install this Tahoma search app. So typically you think, well, that's my only option. I have to check that box in order to get my CUTEPDF Writer installed. But actually I can click on that next button, even though it's grayed out. And what it did then was took me to another screen. Still, if you look at the top, it still thinks I'm installing CUTEPDF Writer, but actually now I'm installing WeatherBug, or I'm trying to. And normally you would hit accept, because that's what you do when you install programs. You hit the defaults, you say next, 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 until it's installed, and then you're done. Well, in this case, you would think you have to hit accept, because if you decline it, you're not going to install CUTEPDF. In reality, you would not, you're declining WeatherBug, but you're still going to accept CUTEPDF. So it's kind of contrary to what you would normally do. And the same thing again, you're accepting their privacy policy. Now, WeatherBug is a legitimate program. It puts a little app in your taskbar that shows you the current weather, but you were intending to install CUTEPDF, not the WeatherBug. This is another example of if you try to go to Adobe's website and download their ACROBAT reader software. Notice that there's 3 check marks on this page for the Security Scan Plus, the True Key, and then the Chrome extension there. So it's up to you to deselect those options. By default, if you just said, if you click on Install Now and install the product, it's going to install Adobe Acrobat Reader, but it's also going to install these other 3 programs. They are all, legitimate programs. McAfee Security Scan Plus scans your computer for viruses in addition to your antivirus software. But what they'll also do is then kind of nag you to buy the McAfee security or antivirus software versus the one that you already have on your computer. This is another example of advanced SYSTEMCARE. It's a program that kind of cleans up your computer, removes temporary files. But on this one, notice it's if you accept the express install, all that verbiage there says that they're going to install the IOBit apps toolbar and extensions into Internet Explorer, Firefox, Google Chrome. It's going to change the start page in Firefox. It's going to install Domain Error, eBay, and Amazon Assistance in Google Chrome. It's going to set Baidu as your default search provider and homepage. And so as you can see, it's doing loads of things. And again, you intended to install Advanced SYSTEMCARE 7, and it's actually trying to do a lot more than that. If you choose the option down below, which is custom install, they used another dark pattern there where they've said, this is for advanced users. They're trying to trick you into thinking that you shouldn't accept that. You should just take the express because you're not advanced enough to choose. Well, if you choose custom, it's still, by default, it would actually have all those checkboxes selected, and it would still do everything that the express install does, but you can actually choose to remove some of the options that are being included that you didn't intend to put on. This is another example of driver booster. So a driver on a computer is, they're required. It has to tell your computer how to control something. So if, for example, if you have a printer, you have to put printer software on there or a driver, which tells your computer how to format the output when it sends it to the printer. So they're all free, but this is software that will try to identify you. Oh, it says it's free right up here. It tells you that there's 11 outdated device drivers, but the second you go down here at the bottom right to update it, that's when they're going to tell you, oh, you want to actually get these drivers updated? Well, then it's going to cost you $40 or whatever the value is to do it. So it's simply a trick to make you think that you have to pay to get these drivers updated when in reality you don't. This is an example of a browser hijack. So it used to be that I would go to Google all the time, and now all of a sudden I've been redirected to this hpmyway.com, and notice they highlight the fact that it's enhanced by Google. So you would think that, oh, nothing has changed, I'm still using Google, but that's not the case. It's obviously they're trying to redirect you to their website versus Google's. The other thing I want to point out here is I use Google Chrome, and they use extensions. So an extension are these little icons at the top right. And in my case, I use AdBlock Plus, which is the little stop sign symbol that you see there, which stands, ABP stands for AdBlock Plus. The other one next to it is Adobe Reader. So typically those can be good and they can be bad. A lot of times I see that people have extensions included in their browsers that will either, give them more advertising or advertisements, or they will redirect their searches or redirect their homepage. So just to be aware that if you have loads of icons up here, that typically those are browser extensions that you didn't intend to put on there, but got added. So you can remove those and not necessarily have them affect you. So this is an example of a program I tried to download called MALWARE. It's a legitimate program. It's a very good program. They have a free version of it and a paid version of it. And I tried to download this, excuse me, the free version. I ended up on this download.com website. Well, first of all, I want to point out that with MALWARE, they have their own website, malwarebytes.org. And that's really where you should be getting the download from. So that's the first thing you need to pay attention to, is that if you're searching for a known software, make sure you're getting it from the site that you should be getting it from. And sometimes that can be difficult to determine. But when you do a search, you have to pay attention to what website it's taking you to, and make sure that it's going to their site versus some other one. So I ended up on this download.com site, and you'll notice first off that there's multiple download buttons here. So if I click on this start download at the top up here, it's actually going to put in one of those fake optimizers. As it says over here, it's going to scan and fix up to 100 errors. That's one caution you have to take, is when you go to a download site, first you have to pay attention to where the download buttons are and make sure that you're actually downloading what you think you are. So in this case, you could go to this download now and it would bring in the malware bytes, but has the potential to have other things added onto it that if you went to the actual malwarebytes.org site, you wouldn't get. You would simply get Malwarebytes. So how do you prevent doing this? Well, one of the key things is when you're installing software, as I mentioned first, the download site, pay attention to that you're going to a legitimate site. And if you are, did download something and you start the install, pay attention to the top navigation bar. It's not always the case, but sometimes that'll show that if you've transitioned from one install to a different program, it'll tell you in that top navigation bar that you've gone from installing CUTEPDF to WeatherBug, for example. Now, in my example I used earlier with CUTEPDF, that wasn't the case, but sometimes you need to look at that top bar to pay attention. The other thing is I always recommend never go with the standard install or the express, the default, whatever they call it. I always select the custom or advanced option. So the reason is it still will do the exact same thing as the standard install. You simply have the chance to review every step of the way whether or not you want to install something or not. So if you just say accept the defaults, a lot of time it will install everything without you even knowing that it's doing it. Where if you accept advanced or the custom option, it'll then walk you through step by step where it's going to install it, what other programs it's including. So that's the one thing I always recommend is always use the advanced. So let's next talk about SCAREWARE. SCAREWARE implies that it's software. So it's called, they're basically trying to scare you into action. They're going to, say, oh, there's something critical that needs to be done. They want you to react right away. I mentioned software here, but it really comes in the form of a phone call potentially too. So it's not really software sometimes. It can be just a pop-up on a web page. It can be that you type a phone number to get a Yahoo support phone number, or Amazon support, whoever it is you're looking for. And if you get an incorrect number, you end up in the wrong spot. So it is scareware, but it's not really software. So one cold calling scam that you'll get a lot is what's called the technical support scam. This honestly is the #1 thing that I see out there, Dave, for scams. It comes in 3 forms. It's either they call you up at your home, they tell you that you have a virus and they want to help you out. The other form is that you search for a phone number for support for somebody, you call that number and you get the same people. And the third way is that you get a pop-up on your screen that tells you to call an 800 number, you call that number, and they're going to give you the same rigmarole that you get when they cold call you. So when they do, if you did answer the phone and talk to these people, the first thing they're going to do is have you go to a website, download a piece of software that allows them onto your computer. And then once they do that, they will always show you fake messages that make you think that you're infected. And then once they've done that, they will try to sell you a plan that will protect you. And then usually it starts in the $400 range. Sometimes I've heard it be higher. Typically they will put free software on your computer and make you think that they've given you something, but they never do, other than giving you less money in your pocket. And it's always the case, whether it's a pop-up and you call the number, or if they call you and do it, it's the same method that they use. They're very good at their manipulation, so just be cautious on that. This is an example of a Yahoo phone number. I was searching for a Yahoo phone number, and by the way, you won't find a phone number to talk to Yahoo, Google, any of the main big technology companies nowadays. So just be cautious. Anytime you're looking for a phone number, whether it's Amazon or any online service you're trying to call, the vast majority of times they don't have a phone number for you to call. In this case, I searched for Yahoo, and it shows you that you have a couple of sites that list an 800 number. If you call that number, guaranteed you're going to be talking to the same people that are cold calling you, or that ended up with a pop-up on your screen. You'll notice also that I've highlighted the sites that these numbers are listed at, and neither one of them have yahoo.com in them. They're both other people putting out fake tech support numbers that if you call, they'll say they're with Yahoo support or Google support, whoever you're looking for, but that's not the case. They're going to do the exact same methods as the others. So this is one that isn't really a threat, honestly, but it is something that's in the news currently. There isn't really a spot to put this, so I put it in SCAREWARE because it is something that people are fearful about currently. And so since the use of Zoom during the coronavirus epidemic, they've had a lot of instances of this Zoom bombing. And so what Zoom bombing is there's, for example, in our case, if one of you were to take control of the screen and start broadcasting profanity or pornography or something like that, that's an example of a Zoom bomb. Well, we've actually taken measures to make our meeting secure so that you don't have the ability to share your screen, so you can't do that. But what was happening is there was a bunch of open private meetings, or excuse me, open public meetings that anybody could join. And also by default, anybody that joined that meeting could actually share their screen. And so one of these people, just for joys, I guess, would start doing this, either annotating inappropriate material or broadcasting pornography or just yelling, just disrupting the meeting just for fun. I guess they're getting stir crazy sitting at home. And so that's their method of doing it. So it's not as if, Zoom has been hacked and somebody has gotten your information. That's that's not the case. It's simply a nuisance. But there is ways that they've put in some measures, Zoom has, that make it easier to control the meetings and make them more secure since that's happened. So that's what they've done there. And so that's now why you have to register for the class. And in future meetings, we'll have passwords, but just an FYI, that's what the Zoom bombing is all about. So we'll go through a few SCAREWARE examples. This is an example of the pop-up that ends up on your screen that it's using an old, a long time error message in Windows computers called the blue screen of death. And so they're trying to emulate that look. You'll notice that right off the get-go that the word technicians has 2 S's in it, so that's misspelled. And typically these messages, when they pop up, and by the way, you can get them pretty much anywhere. I've been trying to go to Amazon before and had a message like this pop up. So they're basically an advertisement in essence that pops up on your screen, and it's designed so that you cannot click the X to close the message out. And so therefore you think, since I can't close this message, I must really be infected, and I'll call this the 888 number on there to try to get help. And they'll always tell you, don't shut down your computer, that you'll lose data. But in reality, that's exactly what you should do. Because if you shut your computer down when this message is on the screen, when it comes back on, the message won't come back typically. People have said, well, I can't shut it down, it doesn't let me. Well, it is true that you can't close the message down, but you can always click up on the Apple logo and do the restart, or you can click on the Windows Start button and select, power, and then restart there. And then normally the message will go away. There are instances that I've seen that people have their web browser set to automatically open up the last web pages they were on when they closed it down. And so if you do that, the next time if you shut your computer down, restart it, when it comes back on, it's going to take you back to the web pages you're on. You also may find that, for example, like I use Chrome, when I shut my computer down without closing Chrome down, when I open Chrome back up, it will tell me that it didn't shut down properly, and do I want to restore the pages that I was on? Well, if I do that, I'm going to have the same problem again. Excuse me, it's going to just bring me back to exactly where I was with that message on the screen. So just shut down and don't go back to where you were before. This is just another example of that same message on a Macintosh computer versus or an Apple computer versus a Windows computer. Same thing, they'll try to tell you that you're at risk of losing credit card information or your passwords, whatever it is. This is an example kind of a scareware and a pup. So this is a program that somebody inadvertently put on their computer, and now they're trying to tell you that they've run this scan and they found 32 infected files. Well, that's bogus. It's not. For one thing, it didn't actually run a scan on your computer. It simply popped up with a message that shows that there are infections when in reality there aren't. And so if you try to activate the software to potentially fix your problem that you don't have, they'll try to charge you money to activate their software when in reality it's just a false report. So on to phishing is the next threat that we faced. And as you can see, this isn't an attempt to acquire sensitive information. Now, typically, it's you that's putting the information in. So they're sending you an email with a link in it for you to click on. And once you click on that link, you can then put in your bank account information or your credit card information, or your Medicare number, whatever it is they're seeking to find. But typically it's up to you to click on the link and for you to enter the information. It's not like they're stealing it off of the computer. So a couple facts. Basically the older Americans are targeted more than most others, and they have lost roughly $3 billion every year to fraud. And the reason they target us is because we have more wealth than we did in our younger days, typically. We also tend to be more trustworthy, and we also tend to be less sophisticated about technology, although thankfully with your attendance here today, you're going to be more aware by the end of this, and so you'll be less susceptible to this. So this is the advanced fee scam. I miss being in a classroom environment when I show you this screen, because every time I've taught this class and I put this slide up, I get a giggle out of everybody that nobody would fall for that scam. That scam has been out there so long that we all know about that. Well, that's exactly what I'm trying to do with all these other scams, is make you aware so that it is irrelevant. They're like these tech support scams. You'll see it so much moving forward. Some of you probably have seen it already, I would guess. And so once you're aware that it's there, we can just laugh at it and just ignore it. This is a stranded traveler scam. It can also be a scam where this can come either via phone call or via email. And the one problem with it via email is it tends to come from somebody you know. They used a technique called spoofing, which I'm going to talk about later. But it looks like it comes from somebody you know. They say they're in a foreign country and they can't get back in the country. They need you to wire money. Another method is via phone call. You'll get a call from a young person that says they're your granddaughter or your grandson, and then they need to have bail money to get out of jail, and then they'll immediately pass the phone off to somebody else that is the negotiator to get the money out of you. So you don't have time to react to determine, was that really my granddaughter or grandson I was talking to? and you're convinced, since you're so fearful, that you were indeed talking to them, and people will actually then wire money to these scammers. And so just to be aware that take the time, get more information out of them. Don't just fall for it when they're trying to give you these scams. It's a little more cumbersome with, when a phone call, when you get that happening, but again, take the time to question them, make sure that they're legitimate. Nobody's going to do that, by the way, but just so you know, that's another scam that's out there. These are several more. One of them is the census scam, where you'll get a census taker that will either call you up, or you'll get it via email, or even door to door. They may show up and they're trying to obtain your either credit card info or your social security card. That's not true. The census takers don't ask for that information. They also have government issued ID. So if they do show up at your door, question them, ask to see their ID, make sure they're legitimate. And of course, they won't be asking for the credit card and social security anyway. But even if they do show up, no matter what they're asking for, make sure they're legitimate. Another scam I've seen regularly is the election scam, where people are trying to get you to donate money, generally to fake fundraisers. So what you want to do is go to your candidate's website directly. Never fall for the ad on Facebook or via email that says that they're, that you want to, they want donations. Make sure you go to your candidate's website. That way, that you're donating directly to them and not to some other scammer. Medicare, one of the scams out that I've heard of is the free DNA test for cancer, or to get free medical devices. And they're typically just trying to get your Medicare number. And again, you shouldn't give that out to anybody but just medical professionals. The Amazon scam is one, it can be done with UPS or any of the other providers, but with Amazon, there's 3.5 billion packages they ship every year. And so what will happen is you'll get an email that says that you need to confirm your credit card information in order to get your package delivered. And when you do that, you're either going to give them that credit card and they'll then capture that, or you're going to potentially click on a link that will take you to a site that has malware. If you do click on the link, it'll take you to a website that looks pretty much exactly like Amazon, but it won't be Amazon's site. Also, you should just go directly to Amazon. If you get a notification that says your package is delayed, then log into your Amazon account, go into your orders, and check the status there. And that's a much safer method. Also, with the COVID-19, there's vaccine emails out there. Again, they're trying to get your credit card information, telling you that there's a vaccine when in reality there isn't. Same issue, you may end up on a site with malware, which stands for malicious software. Always just go to the government health agency websites. Start there for any updates. That's the most current information. Don't trust anything in an email. The other thing that's come out with this COVID-19 is there's loads of new websites popping up, most of them in countries that are known for their maliciousness, Russia being one of them. And so you just have to be cautious that just, a domain doesn't tell you what country it's in. Some can be, but if they, have COVID19help.com and you go to that website, you don't know where that is really. So just be cautious with any of the new sites. And once again, just make sure that you use the government agency sites versus some random one. Another method that they use to try to get information out of you is through SMISHING, and that is phishing, but using text messages. So as you can see, SMS is what's known as text. And so never click on any links in a text message. I randomly get ones. I don't know why anybody would just click on it when you don't know the source of it. Also, if it's trying to get you to download an app, never do that. And also, if you have the option to stop or to opt out of the messages. You can send a stop message. So my doctors send me updates of my doctor's appointments. If I don't want to receive their notices, I can simply text stop to that number that it came from, and that will unenroll me from their text messaging. Well, if you do that with the smishing, it simply acknowledges to the scammer that you have a valid phone number, and they're going to send you more. So never click on the links, and definitely never, just delete it. Delete the conversation, delete the message. The other trick that they use is a technique called typo squatting. So it's basically a website that has been created that is spelled similarly to an existing company. So for example, if somebody had Amazon.com, instead of the O in Amazon, they have a 0 in that. You know, it could be a site that looks exactly like Amazon, but yet it's not. And so if somebody mistyped Amazon.com when they were typing it in, it would actually take them to that fake Amazon site, and then they would be capturing anything that you did on that site while you were there. So just be cautious. When you type in an address to go, you know, if I want to go to Amazon.com, I normally type Amazon.com, hit enter to go to that website. You can do that, but before you hit enter, just double check the website, make sure you didn't misspell it, and then hit enter, and that will take you to the correct site. So some of the things in phishing attacks that you normally always see, you'll have, you have generic greetings. They don't address it to Mr. Harter. They're going to address it to dear valued customer, for example, or it's going to be a very generic name. It'll have misspellings almost always, bad grammar. They always are making a sense of urgency or threat. So they want you to react immediately without thinking, instead of just, you know, waiting a little bit, being patient, and then thinking, oh, is this really true or not? The other thing that you can do, well, first of all, never click on a link in an email. But if you're curious and you want to just look at the address to see where it is actually going, if it's really indeed going to Amazon or to Bank of America or whatever the site is. In my example here, I have this never click link on my slide. If I hover my mouse over that, you'll notice I get a little pop-up there that tells me what that address is, fakeaddress.com. So without even clicking on it, I can tell that that's a bogus address. So I would simply delete that email message and never click on the link. If you ever do get notifications from your bank that they need you to go look at something or redo your credentials, then you go to the bank's website directly, you sign in, and from there, there is always a secure messaging option that allows your bank to communicate with you in a secure manner. And so look at it from that perspective, or call your bank directly. Never do it via an email. So the spoof that I was talking about early, so I constantly get a call from somebody that will tell me that they have been hacked. And I'll ask, well, how is it that you know you've been hacked? And they'll say, well, my friend Joanne received an email message from me. And so that in and of itself does not mean that you've been hacked. So what I'll ask the person to do then is go into their sent items and look for a message that you sent to Joanne. If that message is in there, then yes, somebody has logged into your account and sent email out on your behalf. If there's nothing in your sent items, then you have been a victim of spoofing. And so spoofing is a method that these scammers use to send a message that looks like it comes from your address, but in reality it doesn't. And so I can go to my computer right now. I'm at it, obviously. I can open up my email. I can put in your email address in the from field. And then I send that message out, and it will go out and it will go to whoever I sent it to, but it will show that it came from you, not from me, even though I sent it from my computer. So that's a form of spoofing. Now, when you send anything in an email, you must know that it's insecure. There's no data in email that's secure unless you have an encrypted email message. So anything that you send via email, it has the potential for somebody to look at it on the internet. So they have tools out there that can monitor network traffic as it's going through the internet, and they can gather that information. And so that's how they obtain these email addresses, is through this kind of filtering that they do, that they monitor all this traffic. They use all this data that they've collected, and then they send out bulk emails to try to get somebody to respond to it. And so that's what's called spoofing. There's nothing you can do about it, unfortunately. I just want you to know that it is a tactic that they use, but you can't really change that, unfortunately. So let's step through a couple of phishing examples. This is a current, obviously trying to take advantage of the coronavirus. So this is regarding SAFTI coronavirus awareness. Well, SAFTI is supposed to be safety, by the way. And notice right at the get-go in that message, it shows us they have a misspelling. So that should have been my first clue. The other thing is it's going out to Dear Sir. So again, it's that generic greeting. They are using the World Health Organization logo, and it does show that it comes from the World Health Organization in the from field up here, but that description up there can be changed by anybody. It's simply a friendly description field that I can put whatever I want. I have my name in my outgoing email, but I could put World Health Organization instead of Dan Harter. And when you got an email, it would show that it came from World Health Organization, not Dan Harter. So just to be aware. It also, they'll do other things such as, well, there's some more misspellings down here. They show that it's from a specialist Wuhan virus advisory. Since this virus initiated in Wuhan, China, they're trying to play on that familiarity. If you click on that button here, the safety measures, this is a picture, so I can't hover over it to see where it would take me. But if I clicked on it, it then likely is going to take me to a site that contains malware, or either that or they're requesting information such as credit card info or social security number, something else that's identifiable to me. This is a banking example. Now, I've seen these occur even though I don't have a Bank of America account. I'll end up with this. So that's just one more obvious reason that it's a phishing attempt. But again, it's exclusively for valued customer. They use the logos and everything so it looks legitimate. And if you click on that, please click here link, again, it's going to take you to a website that looks exactly like Bank of America, but it's not. And it's going to then have you type in your information so that they then can capture your Bank of America login information. So again, any banking, if you get a notice like this, go directly to your bank. Either call them or go to the bank's website, sign in, look for any messages pertaining to any unusual information, login attempts or anything, and do it. You initiate it. Don't do it from somebody sending you something. Another example of the IRS. So again, it's from IRS Online. But notice that the email address is not IRS Online, it's irxt.com. So irs.gov, first of all, they wouldn't send you anything via email. They do it all through the snail mail. So it's just, there are clues every time that you look at this that you can tell that it's phishing. Also that they're trying to get you to act immediately, or either your account's been compromised or they have money for you. They're trying to get you to react. So that's their whole intent of their phishing scam. This is an example that I received myself. It was one that got me for a couple of seconds because this person, Sharon Rastello, she was a former president of a business partnership that I'm in, and I'm the treasurer. And so this message was asking me to send an outgoing payment today, and it didn't give me the method to do it. But if I would have replied and started that interaction with them, asking about where does it need to go, what's the money, they would either given me the routing information for me to send the money to, or would have asked me for my bank account information. So it was interesting that, that it was one, I'm the treasurer and it's from somebody I know, although that's not her address. That was the one thing that I looked at that, that I knew immediately, or, not immediately, but shortly after getting it, that I knew it was fake. So just an FYI that it's in essence a spoofing that says it's coming from Sharon Rastello, but it's not. Another example of one that I received that shows that I have some email sync problems with my account. And if I would click on the preview emails now at the bottom, it would take me to a site which more than likely would have malware on it. One of the things I noticed on this message is that the domain up here in the email is KE. And if you look up that domain, it's actually from Korea. And also in the web address down here, the mavspb.ru, the RU domain is Russia. So a couple of points that it's coming out of Korea, but they're trying to get me to go to a Russia website. Again, it would more than likely have contained malware. Another example, a customer of mine that received this that said that somebody had purchased something on their account. But one of the first things I noticed, well, they try to tell you, it's in a foreign country, so you'll react that, oh my goodness, somebody in Kenya's got into my account and they bought this app on my behalf. But I noticed that the email doesn't come from Apple. It actually comes from this domain DE, which is Deutschland or Germany. Also, if I hover over this link at the bottom, it actually shows me that it's going to this different website. Now, again, nothing to do with Apple. So they're just trying to trick you into clicking on a link and either getting infected or providing information that you shouldn't. Okay, so this is now the worst of the worst. Most everything else that we showed you before is, the phishing, obviously they're trying to steal your information, your credit card information or your login information, but really it's you that's doing the damage. They simply have lured you in to clicking on something and providing the information for them. They're using that social engineering aspect. Where malware, if you get infected, it can actually do things that are a little more damaging, and it can actually, harvest data off your computer to try to obtain your usernames and passwords or your credit card information as you submit those to websites. Malware is short for malicious software. It is designed to damage you. One of the worst ones out there is ransomware. I'm going to show you a couple examples on that. And it actually will encrypt all of the files on your computer and then charge you a ransom to get them back. So how is it that you get infected with malware? The first method is that social engineering, where they'll send you an email with a link in it, and you are so in tune to just clicking on a link without thinking that you end up on a site that then has been compromised, and now you've infected yourself. Or they also come with software. If you end up going to a site that has illegitimate software on it, and they have malware bundled in with that, you can end up with it that way. You simply could end up on a website that has been hacked or compromised and get infected that way as well. The other way that they try to either capture the information or infect you is through what's called the man-in-the-middle attack. That is, for example, if you go to the Tampa airport, you connect to their open Wi-Fi, no password on it. Somebody could be sitting on that Wi-Fi network and they can be watching all the traffic that goes on between all the computers that are connected to the Wi-Fi and whatever else they're doing on the internet. And so they simply can use those tools I talked about earlier that monitors all the traffic on the internet, and they can capture that information and use that information for their behalf. So that's something, when you're on an open Wi-Fi network, be very cautious at what you do. The other thing they can do with the man in the middle is, with the Tampa airport, they have a Wi-Fi network that's broadcast that anybody can see the name of it. And I could easily show up there and create another Wi-Fi network with the exact same name as the Tampa airport. And it could be an open Wi-Fi network just like theirs is. So when you go in there and you go to the Tampa airport and you connect to that Wi-Fi, you might be connecting to my Wi-Fi network, not to the actual Tampa airport's Wi-Fi. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about some other ways you can kind of protect yourself with that a little bit later, but that's what the man in the middle is. The exploit kit is when you have an old Mac computer that hasn't updated the operating system for a number of years, and there are known problems with that Mac software. And so what the scammers and the hackers do is they exploit those known vulnerabilities. Same thing with the Windows computer. If you have a Windows 7 or a Windows XP, one of the older versions of Windows, and they discover that there's a problem with it, they're not going to patch those holes. And so hackers have these toolkits that will go out there and just explore the internet for any computers that are out there that have these known vulnerabilities, and then that's when they'll exploit them. You can also end up on a site that has malvertising, which is an infected advertising. And so if you click on an advertisement that's infected, you could indeed potentially infect yourself as well. A hotspot is where I take my phone and I turn it into a hotspot, which what that means is it creates, my phone basically becomes a Wi-Fi router. So I can then, if, say for example, I have a laptop that I want to get online with, but I don't want to connect to the free open Wi-Fi network at Tampa. So I can turn my phone into a hotspot and it will create a Wi-Fi network named Dan's iPhone. And then I simply go to my Wi-Fi settings on my computer and I connect to the Dan's iPhone Wi-Fi, and now I've got a secure connection between my phone and my computer, and then it uses my phone's internet to get, that's much more secure than using an open Wi-Fi network. That's another method to do. So this is just an example of an email that I received randomly that simply said purchase order. It was very vague of what it said, but it had an attachment on it. So if I would have been curious, and some people do this, I don't know why, if I double click that purchase order.ace, it likely contains a virus or ransomware, malware, something that's going to infect your computer. So the best thing to do here is simply delete it and never open an attachment. Even if it is an attachment from somebody you know, I always recommend that you call that person and talk to them or email them and say, hey, Joe, you sent me this Word document. Is it something you intended to send me? Because if, it may be they didn't even know that they sent it to you, that it could be a form of spoofing, or if it, so you just to be aware, it's much easier to be cautious. Make sure that what they're sending you is legitimate. Don't just blindly open it up to find out what it is, because then it's probably too late. This is an example of one of the early ransomware. It's crypto locker. So again, I told you this is one where they encrypt all of the files on your computer, all your pictures, documents, everything. If you have a backup attached to it, it'll encrypt that typically. They give you a time frame for you to pay this ransom. And in this case, it was 95 hours. And normally what it will do is increase in value after that time frame. So in this case, it was a $300 ransom. And they will give you, once your files are encrypted, you need another key to decrypt the files. And so when you've been infected by this, you have to pay the ransom to get the decryption key, or you have to restore your files from backup. Those are the only two things you can do. Otherwise, you've lost all of your files. We've seen in the news recently that multiple actually, no more than a couple, city governments have been infected with ransomware. I know of 2 police forces up in the Northeast that have been infected, and they've actually paid the ransom to get their files back. I can't comprehend how government does not have their files backed up. I mean, since that's what I used to do in a hospital environment, so that was the key thing. But people lose their jobs over that. But just keep in mind that without the backup, that you're infected. They'll typically tell you not to pay the ransom because that, for one, you aren't guaranteed that they will actually give you the decryption key. And also it basically incentivizes them that, if they're able to get money, they're going to just do more of this. So they say just to bite the bullet and don't do it. Although it's hard to put up that argument when you've got, city governments actually doing that, and even police forces. So just take that with what it's worth. This is just another example of another ransomware. There's loads of these out there. There are a lot of different variations of the same one, but they all do exactly the same thing. Encrypt your files and hit a ransom up for it. And they do it using Bitcoin so that they're non-traceable. Because most people always say, well, if I'm paying this ransom, why don't you just go arrest them? Well, most of the time they're not in the US for one. And the other thing is they're doing it in such a way that you're paying them that we can't find out who they are. So the first thing that you should always do is back up your data. And you have a couple of options there. One of them is cloud-based. For example, Carbonite is one cloud-based backup service that is an option. And they tend to charge you about $60 or $70 a year. The one thing I do like about them is they're set and forget it. So you set your backup up, it just backs up your files automatically, and you don't have to think about it. The thing I don't like about a cloud service is that it only backs up your files. So it doesn't back up your Mac operating system, your Windows operating system, all your programs, Office, Quicken, QuickBooks, anything that you've installed on that computer doesn't get backed up. It simply backs up your pictures and your Word documents and Excel spreadsheets and all that type of data. So my personal recommendation is to use an external hard drive. And in a Mac environment, they do a lot better job of backing up to the portable devices than the Windows does. With the Mac, they back up, it's called Time Machine is their backup software, and it will back up hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, and then when that fills up, when the hard drive fills up, the Mac backup will automatically delete the really old backup, the oldest backup, and then it will put the most current one onto the drive. With Windows, you have to manually go in and remove the old backups in order, once it runs out of space. So, and it's not really obvious that once you run out of space that it quits backing up. So the one thing I do like about Windows backup is I recommend what's called a system image. And I do this monthly. I specify on the slide here that you can do it daily or weekly, but honestly, it really depends on one, how critical your data is, and also about how much new data that you're putting on your computer. So if I go on a trip and take my camera and take 1,000 pictures and I come back, I load those pictures on my computer, then I want to back it up immediately after I do that. And I use a system called System Image. And what that does is it creates a complete clone of your computer. And that includes the Windows operating system, my Office, my printer software, I mean, everything, all the pictures, all your documents, all your data, everything gets backed up into that clone. And so that if you were infected with the virus, you simply can restore your computer back to that point in time that you made the backup. Now, if you only do it monthly, you have the potential to lose a whole month of data. But again, it kind of depends on how much data you're putting on it. So if you're putting on loads of pictures, back it up so you at least have captured all that data that you just added to it. Now you can get an external hard drive off of Amazon for under $50 for a 1 terabyte drive, which is typically all you'll need, especially if all you're doing is creating a clone. The clone basically just overwrites the previous one. So I just take a snapshot of my computer at that point in time so I know I'm current as of that date. The other thing that you should do is make sure that you have antivirus software. This is less important on a Mac than it is on a PC. All of the antivirus makers, or excuse me, the virus people out there, they create viruses in what I consider the low-hanging fruit. Windows computers are a lot less secure than the Mac operating system is. It's much more difficult to create a virus for a Mac. So the people that create viruses, 95% or more, probably target Windows computers because it's easier. And plus, there's a lot more of them. So make sure that you do have antivirus. The good news with the current computers with Windows 10, they have free antivirus built in called Windows Security. It's actually one of the top rated antiviruses. There's also loads of other free ones proven to be just as good as the paid versions. On the Mac operating system, there's also free versions out there that are adequate. Even though Macs aren't targeted as much as Windows, it still is not a bad idea to have antivirus on them just to be safe, because it doesn't hurt. The bottom line, though, is that really the best antivirus is you. Every virus manufacturer gets infected. So just because you have Norton, if you think it's the best antivirus, I guarantee you I've found a computer with Norton antivirus on it that has become infected. So just be aware that your behavior is really just as important, if not more so, than the antivirus software. So you need to be cautious. These things I'm teaching you today about not clicking on links, not opening files, be cautious about what websites you go to. That's much more important than your antivirus software is. The other thing that you need to do is update your operating system. So in Windows 10, the updates are automatic. You're forced to get your updates. On the Mac operating system, they'll notify you when the updates are available. But you should do those updates because they fix a lot of these exploits that I'm talking about. They also include features that, sometimes it's a nuisance that they change the way we do things, but that's the downside of getting the updates. But they do provide security updates. So that's why it's important, even though the features that they are what I consider dumping on you, even though they don't ask you if you want them, it still is more important to get the operating system fixes, and those are included with some of the features as well. Also on your apps, whether it's on your iPhone or your Android phone, always make sure that your apps are updated, as well as your iOS or your Android operating systems as well. Typically they'll notify you when those apps are available. And again, it's the same concept. Sometimes they're simply enhancements or features, but other times, a lot of times, it's security problems that they're trying to correct. So make sure that you stay current on all of those updates. The other thing you should do is create passwords. And you know, most people will tell you, oh, make it complex. Make sure that it has uppercase letters, lowercase letters, numbers, and special characters. Well, really the most important thing is actually the length of the password. So it's much more important to have 14 or longer password, 14-digit or longer, than it is to have uppercase and lowercase numbers and special characters. So just to keep that in mind, one technique you can use is to use this passphrase. And that simply takes a sentence that's a little easier to remember and converts that into a password. So in my example, I used the sentence, "This is my best password," and then I took out all the spaces, capitalized each letter of the word, and that's much more strong than one that has, you know, special characters. Now the downside is you're going to end up running into a website that has the requirement that you put a number and a special character in that. But you can do that at the end or the beginning of this passphrase, and you'll find that it's much safer way to do it. The other thing that you should not do is don't use the same password, especially for banking sites or any information or any site that has sensitive information. So while it's convenient to have only one password, it's not plausible, honestly, because every website seems to be changing the standards of their password requirements. So you think you're going to get by with an 8-digit one, and then next thing you know, they've changed it to 12, and now you're keep one password for every site's gone out the window. Also, don't store them in a document like a Word document or notes on your phone, especially if you don't password protect your phone or computer, because you know you're basically giving them the all of your login information if you do that. Also, I'd never let the web browser store my password. It's something that's very easily looked up. If somebody stole your computer, they simply could go to your bookmarks or your history, go into your bank site and pull up your bank because you have the login information stored in it. It's also readily available to look up. I mean, I guess from in my perspective, I'm in the business of helping people fix their computers. And when I have to help somebody transfer from one computer to another, they typically don't know what their password is. So I'm able to easily go look in their browser and look it up. But again, that's not very secure. So I wouldn't recommend doing that. It is inconvenient to have to type the information in, but we have options to doing that as well. So first of all, put in a password everywhere. So make sure that you put a passcode on your phone or tablet or on your computer. Now there are utilities that can unlock. For example, I have a program that I can unlock the password on your computer, but the average person doesn't contain that tool, and so, or doesn't have that tool, so they wouldn't be able to do it. So it's at least one layer of security. So you're not going to allow that person just open access to your computer or to your phone. It is a little less convenient, but it's definitely much more secure. So the other thing you can use instead of your little notes on your phone, or I've seen people put it in contacts, they've put it in Word document or Excel spreadsheet. They typically will name it passwords, of course, so that way it makes it easier for me to find it when I'm looking for it. But you can also use what's called the password vault. And those are services that store your password, and you are required to have a master password in order to get into that account. And once you're in, you can then either look up the username and password, or you can actually have it populate the website. So for example, if you have Bank of America as your bank, you can have an entry in your password vault for Bank of America, and it will actually, the vault will actually open up the Bank of America website and place your username and password into that site automatically for you, and you don't have to remember that. The way I do it, I don't even know what my password is. It's just like a 20-digit character, and I just have it inserted every time. I don't even know what it is. So a couple of vaults that I mentioned there. First of all, I always get the question, are they secure? Because if this is a website that maintains passwords, aren't the hackers, trying to break into there to get everybody's password? Well, that is true that, it's known that they contain your password information, but they do it in a manner that is scrambled. So they have algorithms that will take your password and store it in a scrambled format that they could then decrypt later, or encrypt it and decrypt it, just like the kind of like the ransomware example. And so if somebody was to break in there, they would also have to know the algorithm that company uses to store those passwords in order to look at them. Now, from you as a user, if you use a vault, when you put in your master password, you can actually go look at your password and it will show it in plain text. So from your perspective, it looks normal, but if somebody was to look at it where it was stored with the vault, you would not be able to determine what the password is. So a couple of them there I note, Consumer Reports, their top rated password vault is an app called 1Password. The other option there is called Bitwarden, and that's an open source software. It's a free software, but just so you understand what open source is, it's a community of people out there on the internet that share the code of the software as it's being built. So they collaborate to make this software. Now, the theory is, some people say, well, it's open source, so why couldn't somebody just inject malware in there so that when you downloaded this open source software that you're going to get infected with it? But in reality, it's self-policing, because all of these programmers have access to the same code. So they would all have to basically collaborate with each other on putting in that malware to infect people, where in reality it's used as more of a policing tool than it is one for for bad reasons. So there are a load of products that are open source, and they're free, completely free. Another example is OpenOffice, and it is actually a version. It's Microsoft Office, but it's free, and it has Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, everything, the same tools that you have in Microsoft Office, you have with OpenOffice, but it's all open source. So anyway, there's others that are out there that are similar to that, but there's loads of free software that is all open source, and it's been shown that they have been secure, that there haven't been none that I'm aware of that have been infected with malware, simply because everybody's checking each other. So the other thing you should consider is what's called two-factor authentication, and that is, it's basically you need two things in order to get into your account. That's why it's called two-factor. So when I log into my banking website, I have my username and password. That's one thing, even though it's two, an ID and a password. But without those, I couldn't get in at all. So that's one factor. The other factor is I have to receive a text message from my bank in order to log into it. That's the second factor. So the odds of somebody knowing what my password is for my bank and also having access to my phone are pretty much slim and none. So it's a much more secure method in order to to get into your bank, especially if you have key financial information or any critical personal data. it's good to enable this option if you have it. It is a little bit more of a nuisance, but the fact that you get much more security, in my opinion, is it's well worth that little added, you know, the 5 seconds it takes you to receive the text message and key that in. That's much more important. You also should go to your bank and make sure that they have your current information, you know, whether it's your cell phone number for receiving texts or your email address. Make sure those are current, even your address. They may ask that information for security reasons, so you want to make sure it's current. Also, you know, a lot of banks will allow you to set an alert for any unusual card activity. So for example, I could go to my American Express and say, give me an alert every time there's a charge over a certain dollar amount, and it will give me a text message every time that happens. So that way I'm on top of it if somebody got my card and went out and tried to use my card. Biometrics, is that a secure form of password? So biometrics, I mean either your fingerprint or, for example, on iPhones, they use facial recognition. Some newer laptops with the cameras will also do your iris. So all of those are definitely much more secure than just a simple password. So at a minimum, you want two-factor authentication, I would say, especially with banks. So, but the biometrics, if you have that option, that's another form. Keep in mind though, like I log into my computer with my fingerprint, but in reality, I still have a password behind that. Same thing with people that log in with the PIN number on their computer. You still have a password associated with that account as well. So just because it's more convenient to log in that way with just a PIN or a fingerprint, just remember that you do still have a password behind that. So this is another question I get regularly. I get lots of spam email. Should I click on that unsubscribe option at the bottom of the email message? So the answer typically is no. You should not unsubscribe. If you go to Best Buy and you buy something and they ask you for your email as you're checking out, and you get home and next thing you know, you've signed up to their advertising and you're getting 4 or 5 messages a day from Best Buy, in that case, you can go down to the bottom of that message, click unsubscribe, and it will take you off of their list. If it's something that isn't legitimate, like Cialis, or you see hot Asian women, or all these bogus messages that are out there, then those definitely you do not want to unsubscribe from. If you do, you simply are acknowledging to them that they have a valid email address that they can send more spam to. So the only thing you should do if you get messages in your inbox that you don't want in your inbox, you should either hit the delete button, or depending on how you check your mail, normally there's a way to mark it as spam or junk. And over time, your email server, their system should learn that all these emails you're getting are spam. And so they should remove them automatically from your inbox into your spam folder. This is the open Wi-Fi. Again, we talked about that. I'm not going to go into great details. The only other thing I want to point out, 2 other things on this, is don't auto connect to any open Wi-Fi network. So with that, I mean, when I go to my phone and it wants to, or my computer, I go to my computer and I want to connect and it says connect automatically. So if I do that, say I'm flying through Tampa and on my way out, I put connect automatically. When I fly back in and I'm sitting in the Tampa airport, when I come back, my computer is online because I told it to connect automatically. And I may not realize that, and I may do things that I wouldn't do if I knew I was on an unsecure network. So always tell it to not connect automatically. And then if you get to a point where you're at a spot where you need to connect to the Wi-Fi, then go select the Wi-Fi and connect to it manually. And also be cautious about what you do when you're on an unsecure network. The other thing you can consider is a service called Virtual Private Network, or VPN. And these are services that you typically pay for. There are free versions of them, but it basically makes sure that your connection is encrypted. And so you can be comfortable that when you're in an open Wi-Fi network and you're on a VPN, that your session is then secure, and you can do it as if you're on a secure network. So that's a system that's it's definitely a paid service, although there are free ones. The free ones will include either ad supported, or they'll restrict your bandwidth. And so just to be aware of that. There's also, keep in mind that there's free and there's a free trial. So the difference is, a free trial is a program where you will download the software and it will be full features for 30 days. But then after 30 days, you have to pay the fee in order to continue to use the VPN. The actual free version is free, but you're going to be bombarded with ads, or they're going to limit the amount of bandwidth that you can use on a monthly basis before you have to pay for it. So keep in mind that those are a couple of options you have. The other thing is, anytime you're online, make sure, especially if you're on a bank or shopping or putting credit card information or any sign-in information, make sure that you have, you're on a secure site. And the way you do that is through the web address. And the web address that starts HTTP, which is, that's considered an unsecure site. And if it has the S at the end of it, the S stands for secure. That means that you then are encrypted between your computer and whatever computer system you're talking to. So if it's your bank, you know that you're encrypted between your computer and the bank's website. You should also see a padlock up in the address field at the top of your web browser. They're also getting better about pointing it out that it's not secure, and I'll show you in a second what that looks like. Also look, when you are going to a website, make sure that you haven't misspelled something, that you don't end up on a site. If something just doesn't seem right and you thought you're on Bank of America but is not acting right, you may have misspelled the name and ended up on a fake website. So make sure that you're cautious there. Also, there's a web reputation tool, which I mentioned was that McAfee Site Advisor was one example. I use Web of Trust. There's several out there. And those basically add a little extension or add-in into your web browser that when you search for information on the web, it will tell you the reputation of that website and whether or not they think it's safe to visit or not. And then I use the extensions I mentioned earlier, the AdBlock Plus and MALWARE. Both are good and free. So when you are browsing, this is just an example of, thankfully now they're making it obvious by the bottom portion of that screen there. It shows you when you're on a not secure site, it shows that it's just HTTP, and they're making it obvious that it's not secure. And so you should always, it's not that you shouldn't visit that site, but just be cautious about what you are doing when you're on there. So if you are entering any personal information, I would not do it on an unsecure site. But if it's HTTPS and you have the lock, then you're fine to sign in and provide any personal information. So when you are downloading, be cautious for one. Make sure that if you are downloading any apps or programs, that you're doing it from legitimate sites. So that can be a little trying at times. But if you're downloading music, for example, there's a lot of pirated music out there that people are trying to download free music. Those tend to be the sites where you're going to get malware or this unwanted programs on your computer that you didn't intend to get. Same thing with movies. If you're trying to get pirated movies, you're just asking for trouble by trying to get things that, well, for one, they're not legal, and two, they tend to have higher rates of infection when you visit sites like that. If you are going to stream anything, do it through legitimate sites, you know, Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, DirecTV Now, any of the streaming services, those are fine. But it's when you try to get something for nothing that you end up with getting something you didn't want. So just be cautious with that. Also, social media. You know, I just watched something this past weekend with that, and it really pointed out to how far the social media went. It was an episode of Dateline about a group of people that used Facebook to glean information about bank managers, and they did it through a variety of states throughout the East Coast, and they were able to take information that they found off of these people's Facebook pages to manipulate these people to you know, make them think that they had their daughter held hostage in a different state. They knew when babies were born, so that they were vulnerable if they capture, you know, kidnap these individuals. And so they used all this information to make these bank managers go in and take money from their own bank. And it was all based off of data that they found off of Facebook. So it just kind of brought it home to me how, you know, you just don't know where this is going to end up when you put stuff out there on the internet. I've always kind of been a little lax about the posting stuff when I personally don't do it a lot. When I go out of town, I'm not posting my pictures. In fact, I don't look at Facebook at all anymore. I kind of gave up on it. But you know, I used to say, well, you know, you've only got a handful of friends that are looking at it, and they're, you know, I trust my friends, but you don't know where it's going to end up from, you know, from their friends. And it's when you share something, it doesn't just stop at your friends. It can go further than that. So that Dateline episode really brought it home to me. Just be cautious about what you do put out there. Also on pictures, when you do post pictures, the whole point of this slide is really so you are aware that there's information that gets stored within that picture, and it identifies the exact location as well as other data, who took it and other information, you know, that's on that, that's actually attached to that photo. So if you send that picture to somebody else, that information goes with it. So just to be aware that when you do share something with somebody, especially if you work in a classified environment or something like that, you know, you're basically opening stuff up to people that you don't know where it's going to end up. So just to be aware that happens. There is the ability to turn off that, but just to be, I just want you to make you aware that it's something that does exist. So that is it. Also, as you see, my phone and email are out there. Feel free, I don't care whatever the question is, I'll answer that anytime.